So, I wanted to talk about, after the confidence vote in Boris Johnson, just how depressing British politics truly is. Because, the world isn't depressing enough. I want to make it slightly worse.
I mean, you really do live up to your moniker of evil scientist, because even when everybody's like having a good day, you're just like, here's some depressing information for you to bring you down.
So, yes, obviously, the big news in British politics at the minute is that there was a no confidence vote against Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And he was backed by 211 Conservative MPs, because, of course, it's only Conservative MPs that get to vote in a non-confidence vote. And this was, of course, triggered over things like Partygate and his response to lockdowns, these sorts of things.
Yeah, we have pointed out before, it's a point that John Wheatley likes to make over and over again, that the complaint about Partygate is kind of stupid and illogical to a certain extent, because just complaining that he broke the rules is not a good reason to complain about it. What he should be doing is apologising for the fact that the lockdown rules were put in place in the first place.
Yes.
Because they were immoral and distinctly anti-freedom of choice and freedom of association and all
Absolutely.
of those liberties that we in England like to consider as our right.
But in this no confidence vote, it was actually surprisingly close. So 211 Tory MPs voted in favour of the Prime Minister. They gave him their confidence, I suppose.
For some reason.
And 148 voted to remove him, which isn't an insignificant number. And this means that about 41% of his own MPs in his own party wanted him removed, which is pretty big, isn't it? It's almost a majority.
It is pretty big, and they were all cast anonymously as well. So there's varying information on who was actually voting for or against him. Obviously, his cabinet all came out publicly and said that they would be supporting him, and there are a few that were going against him that came out publicly, like Jesse Norman saying, I supported you for 15 years, I can't do it anymore. Although I think, personally, for me, when it comes to, because some people are wondering, who voted against him, who didn't vote against him. For those who did vote against him, I think the important question is why it is.
Yes,
They
and
voted against
I'll
him.
be addressing some of that later on down the line.
Just because when I looked at Jesse Norman's reasoning yesterday, he was saying basically Boris isn't progressive enough, which is great when that's the dissent coming from the Conservative Party,
right.
isn't it?
They're Conservatives. So, to put this 41% figure into context, I'm going to go through a few of the previous non-confidence votes of previous Conservative premiers. So in 2018, of course, you may remember this, it wasn't too long ago, Theresa May survived a no-confidence vote prompted by her Brexit policies. She had about 37% of her MPs voting against her, which is, of course, less than Boris now.
There was more confidence in Theresa May. God.
Yes. In 2003, Ian Duncan Smith narrowly lost a confidence vote with 55% of Tory MPs voting against him. And that's Ian Duncan Smith, the charisma black hole, that only got 55%. You'd think it would have been a little bit more.
Yeah. Just to point out as well, because I don't know if you mentioned it, when Theresa May had 37% voting against her, she still resigned 6 months later. So
yes.
If trends are to be considered, things aren't looking great for Boris.
But it's always difficult to get a certain amount of causality, because they say they resigned because of one thing. You never really know the real reason.
There's lots of backdoor politics.
But in 1990, Margaret Thatcher faced a second leadership challenge in about 12 months, and she won, but 40.9% of her MPs backed the challenger, Michael Heseltine, and then her cabinet eventually persuaded her to resign. So that is about as close to 41% as you can possibly get, 40.9%. And she was persuaded to resign. And that was Margaret Thatcher, who's quite often deified by Conservatives in Britain.
Yes, especially during the 80s when she was winning election after election by landslides.
So this BBC article goes on to outline the number of rebels was higher than had been predicted, and ex-Tory leader William Hague had advised him to quit. So you've got senior Tories, more or less, advising the Prime Minister to quit. This isn't small, this isn't political theatre, this is a serious threat to his leadership, isn't it? However, Dominic Raab, one of the senior ministers, I think he's Deputy Prime Minister, so that you can't get much more senior than that, said there was no credible alternative to Boris Johnson. And I can kind of see where he's coming from. Although I'm not a fan of what Boris Johnson has done, when you think of the Conservative Party, you don't think of a party brimming with potential, do you, or competence?
No, there's a few backbenchers that I'm aware of who don't get really much spotlight, who are seem to actively care about British values, British traditions, protecting borders and such, but they don't seem, as far as
They're
I can
not
tell.
popular. That's the problem. There are people that we like. However, they're not the ones that are.
Like Desmond Swain has seemed to show himself a number of times to actually be someone who cares about the values and traditions of England. He's said a number of times, Britain is full. We should close the borders. He's also said we need to maintain our traditional liberties. All these sorts of things that really speak to me, but there's sadly no chance that he's going to be getting.
There are a handful of really good MPs and members of the House of Lords out there. Daniel Hannon's one of my personal favourites in the House of Lords. He's very good on the economy, very staunch free marketeer.
Good man, good man.
Yeah, we've got the free market podcast today, haven't we?
Right now, yes, we do.
So I wanted to move on to talk about some of the views within the Conservative Party, and this series of tweets from Lord Frost here is pretty useful. So he said, "I worked closely with Prime Minister Boris Johnson over the last 5 years. Without his leadership between 2019 and 20, we would simply not have succeeded in getting out of the EU or getting a free trade agreement. I hugely admire his determination in those difficult days." So he's framed it as in, okay, well, he's one of the few people who was able to get us out of the European Union. However, he goes on to say, and if you can scroll down a bit, John, to some of his other tweets here, but the task now is to make a success of Brexit with our newfound freedoms. I said when I left the cabinet a few months ago that I had concerns about the current direction of travel, and I do, and if anything, they have become reinforced in recent months. And this is something that I hope to see more, because lots of people are concerned that we've not really capitalised from leaving the European Union, which is Boris's obvious
We absolutely have not. The
crowning jewel of his prime ministerialship.
Yeah, the main reason that people voted to leave the EU in the first place was for culture and immigration purposes. And the immigration has, if anything,
gone up. It reached 1 million people in 2021, didn't it?
Yes, and that was during a period where for half the year we were still locked down. So
it's absolutely absurd that, you know, these were the issues that were on everybody's lips that were voting Conservative, and the Conservatives have more or less stabbed their own voters in the back. So no wonder there's some sort of rebellion going on here.
Yes, we can only hope that real Conservatives can actually rise to the top, even though I'm doubtful that will be possible.
So Lord Frost goes on to say, tonight shows the PM does not have the confidence over 40% of the parliamentary party. He must see that reflects widespread disenchantment among members and voters. Yes, about Partygate, but about policies such as high cost of energy programme and tax increases. If the PM is to save his premiership and the government, he should now take a different course, bring taxes down straight away to tackle the cost of living crisis, absolutely. Take on public service reform and establish an affordable and reliable energy policy for the long term. I mean, this is all solid
I was
advice.
going to say, talking about bringing taxes down immediately, it gets me in a good mood. If you could abolish them entirely, even better. But I understand you've got to take baby steps with these things. First things first, tackle the cost of living crisis. Get rid of the government obligation tax that's included in everybody's energy bills, which takes up about 25% of everybody's energy bills. And the government's going, oh, what can we do to solve this crisis that we have obviously caused? I know, let's print more money. Let's cause inflation. That'll solve everything. God.
So you might find this next part amusing, because before the near confidence vote, apparently there was an internal memo which branded Boris the Conservative Corbyn, and this is obviously circulated by some of the Tory rebels, basically suggesting that he was spending too much money.
Well, it's true. I mean,
and it's entirely obvious,
yeah,
isn't it?
I mentioned this yesterday, and the problem is the Conservatives are doing the polar opposite of what a Conservative person should do with this, which is sort of accepting that for the most part, the general public knows what best to do with their time and their money, and stepping back, whereas this government seems to have fallen into the trap of doing the socialist
Some of the
measures.
most authoritarian policies that have been in Britain in the past, I don't know, 30 years or so. I mean, he's outdoing Tony Blair, which I never thought.
It's the problem of government planning, which is you implement planning, and then when the planning doesn't work, you don't think, oh, maybe planning was the problem in the first place. You go, how can we plan ourselves out of this problem that our plans created, which always fails.
So moving on to who might replace him, although I am very sceptical about the fact of him stepping down. I think that he is going to cling on to power like a limpet or a barnacle. He's going to cling on to the whole of Britain.
Yes.
However, it's worth considering who could potentially replace him, and it's not exactly a star-studded cast. So here we have an independent article looking at the odds. This was before the no confidence vote, but they listed them anyway, and it's interesting to see who some of the favourites are. So obviously they've got Rishi, the money printer Sunak, who is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, known for massive spending, unparalleled. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn probably wouldn't even dream of spending as much money as Rishi Sunak.
Shockingly, that's probably true, yeah.
You got Jeremy, lockdowns didn't go far enough, Hunt, former health secretary.
So far, you're just listing communists as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's
and
carry on.
Liz flip-flopping Truss, who is the foreign secretary. And as you can imagine, these aren't their real middle names, obviously. These are the things that I've dubbed them, just to make that clear.
Just in case our Americans didn't get it.
So some other interesting names that were bandied about that I wasn't too familiar were in the race at all was Tom Tugendhat, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Is that his real name?
Yes, it's
Because
quite a cool
that
name,
sounds like
isn't
a
it?
fake name.
He's a former military man as well, I think.
Oh,
so.
okay.
And Penny Mordaunt, who was International Trade Minister, and Ben Wallace, who is the Defence Secretary. So these were people that were potentially penned as leadership candidates, say, if Boris resigned. However, I don't think that's necessarily likely. However, stranger things have happened, and I wouldn't want to predict with 100% certainty that it's going to stay the same.
No, of course. It's just a shame that when you see the other members of the cabinet who are in for the running, it's basically like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, isn't it?
Yes. And talking of Liz Truss, actually, we have an article on Lotus Eaters outlining how and why she got this nickname of flip-flopping Liz Truss from me. This is written by Thomas, though, and basically he outlines how she's moved around wherever was politically opportune. So she was a Remainer under David Cameron, Brexiteer under Boris, lots of other things.
So she's a professional politician.
Yes. Don't think she has any convictions of her own. But one contender I didn't imagine there might be was this next one. So, Tony Blair's new centrist project, just don't call it a party. Remember, it's not a political party. It's just it's a coalition of people in politics that are loosely associated with shared values. I mean,
I can understand
and goals.
why over the Christmas period people are tired enough of hearing about parties in the first place. So I suppose that might have something to do with it. But if Tony Blair is now a centrist, that just shows how far left we've all been pulled against our will.
That is a very good point, because Tony Blair is no longer the radical he used to be. He's now considered a centrist. I mean...
Does he still... I know he's basically said, yeah, radical Islam coming into the country was a mistake. Is he still for open borders?
I don't know. Probably not for Muslims, if that's the case.
The final solution to the problems Tony Blair caused is Tony Blair himself. Is he going on a redemption arc? Is that what's going on here?
Imagine if he came back into politics and was actually the one that saved Britain. How depressing would that be?
Just came back uber-based, although I know that's not true. That's obviously not going to happen. I remember what he was talking about when lockdowns were happening. So
I imagine he's just running from The Hague, but that's what some people are saying anyway. Not me. So don't sue me, Tony, please.
This by a smug fest. Tony Blair, smug. I won't hear of it.
But yes, apparently there's the Future of Britain conference due to take place on the 30th of June, and lots of prominent people are in attendance. I don't have the time to list them all off, but this will be in the reading list on the website if you want to go through and actually read who's attending. There are lots of important names there, but I'm not going to bore you listing them all off. So let's look at the Britain that Boris is in charge of and why he's actually worthy of contempt in the first place. And these are just things I found in the news recently. So, for example, we've got a tweet here from Paul Embry, who I believe was I think he was a fireman, who was a trade unionist.
Pro-Brexiteer, blue Labour type, yeah.
Got in trouble with his own party. But he's saying this is reportedly the manager of a cinema in Sheffield addressing a theocratic mob protesting the screening of blasphemous film The Lady of Heaven. Thoroughly depressing to see him capitulate to their demands and confirm the film has been binned. So yes, I looked up this film, and I think it's a Shia Sunni thing, because I think it's depicting one interpretation of Islam. I can't remember which one it is. And it also, I believe, according to Rory, shows a depiction of the Prophet Muhammad, which you can probably see why there are lots of Muslims out there trying to cancel the film.
Yeah, that's quite
It is showing across Britain if you want to stick it to some Muslims, although I think it is made by some other Muslims, so It's meant to be really good, though. I saw lots
I
of good
mean,
reviews.
as long as it's a good film, but I mean, isn't it so great that we've pointed this out so many times? But it always bears repeating that we have imported ethnic and cultural conflicts from across the pond over here where they never existed
Yes,
before.
I mean, if this showed in Britain with non-Muslim Britons, the original inhabitants of Britain, I don't think we would be too fussed about it, really.
I mean, the thing is, I'm happy to explore and acknowledge and appreciate the art of other cultures, but you don't need to import half of their population for me to be able to to watch the film and go, "Oh, it was good."
We do have the internet. It's possible to get this stuff outside of the country it comes from.
I didn't need to sit down with a bunch of West Africans to watch Blood Diamond and go, "Good film, that."
That would be entertaining, though, wouldn't it?
It would be.
So next, this is just depressing. So census could ask, do you menstruate instead of are you female to boost trans inclusivity, study suggests. This leads quite well into your next segment, although
It will.
I'm not quite done yet. Apparently, this is a taxpayer-funded study which received £579,000 of taxpayer money for this nonsense. I don't know where they found this money. We're all... scraping by, and
we're all
there they are.
Taxed more than we used to. Tax rises here, there, and everywhere. Government obligation taxes, and this is all they can think to spend it on.
And this next one isn't Britain exclusive, but it's just funny, and I thought I'd include it anyway. Burger King Pride Whoppers come with 2 tops or 2 bottoms.
This is the Stone Toss meme.
This is better than satire, isn't it?
This is the Stone Toss meme. How, Mr. Burger King? How will this help us sell burgers? Burgers? That's what this is.
But I just thought it was funny. It's like something that I would make up to satirise Pride Month. But there we go. Burger King being a bit degenerate. There we go. So far more depressingly, we've got this story of a peer in the House of Lords demanding I believe it is a judicial review, as a transgender paedophile has been spared jail. And this is pretty horrific. So sorry to lower the tone here. But a Conservative peer, Baroness Nichols, is seeking a sentence review after a paedophile who identifies as transgender was spared jail. 68-year-old Peter Selby gathered over 125,000 obscene images of child abuse, with more than 2,400 of them being classified as Category A, the most indecent. Selby was born a male, so based GB News. Yes, they're calling him by his male name.
I'm not going to respect the pronouns or fake name of some paedophile.
Yes. That's pretty standard stuff, isn't it?
Pretty hardline position to take, but I'm standing by my principles.
But yes, apparently they received... normally this would garner a 10-year prison sentence, which is probably not even long enough, in my opinion. But apparently they were handed a 14-month sentence, which has been suspended for 2 years.
I can say from experience, from knowing people, that the UK as a whole goes far, far too easy on paedophiles and sentencing. There was a person I used to sit next to at a previous job who used to disappear so that he could look after his mum and then just quit the job altogether. And then in the local newspaper a few years later, I see that he's been arrested and thrown into prison for grooming a 10-year-old child in Stoke-on-Trent, which was especially shocking when I saw he'd only got 2 years for it after the newspaper article.
Appallingly low sentence.
Yes, confirmed that he had physically assaulted the child as well. It's absolutely vile. But this is where we are with the Conservative Party and conservatism in general.
Well,
in
at
the
least
UK.
Baroness Nicholson is doing something. She's actually pushing for a review of this sentence, which is good.
Hopefully we can get something done. But this is happening under the Conservatives' watch.
Moving on to something a bit more absurd. If you could scroll down to the picture a little bit, John. Biological males win women's cycling event. Kiss, while third place female cares for child. And in the picture, it's brilliant. You showed this yesterday, didn't you? So I'm not going to talk about it much. But this was in London.
I think respect to that woman, because I can't accept anything other than that her bringing her child up there was a statement.
I would say so.
It had to be.
Well, in my eyes, she was first place, not those 2 dudes.
Yeah, of course. Those 2 gay dudes making out.
So yes, one of the final things is look at the state of this. So our very own Nick Dixon, who's been on the
A
podcast a few times.
friend of the show.
Yes, he was complaining about a message he received from a place where he was trying to get a gig. And if you could show this message here, John, it says, I'm aware of Nick might well suit the blank more than blank, and blank is a great venue. I kind of have a million billion really good white, straight, able-bodied male comedians that I can call on. I'm trying to find more of the opposite. When I say opposite, I don't necessarily mean a black gay woman in a wheelchair, but I've seen how hard it is for female acts, black acts, etc., to get on good bills, and it's good to mix it up with character acts like blank. Might not be ready for it, but I am. And
Are
of course,
they funny? That's my question. I'm going to a comedy show. Are they funny?
Yes, and he's saying, nothing new, of course, but I'm looking forward to the day when I'm judged only on the content of my character or just the content of my content.
That would be a good start, wouldn't it?
And, of course, being notably frustrated with the fact that, you're not being booked based on your merit, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. This is obvious discrimination.
I mean, literally, in the classic sense of the term, this is him being refused an offer purely because of the colour of his skin and also his sexuality.
And, of course, Pink News reported on this. Comedian moans he can't get gigs because he's white, straight, able-bodied and male. And I don't think it's that he can't get gigs full stop. It's just that he got declined a gig.
This one gig. And is that not a legitimate grievance for him to hold?
Well, yes, of course.
I mean, obviously it is.
So, yeah, it goes on to say, speaking to the Express, Dixon whined, nice neutral language there, this has happened to basically every straight white comedian I know. Whether it's live performances or TV work, everyone this happens to feels it's wrong, even though they might not admit it publicly. Even right-on left-wing comedians will express anger about it in private. Dixon thinks diversity happens naturally under meritocracy. So Pink News directly against meritocracy. Not really a surprise, is it? But yes.
I mean, as a publication, it should be obvious enough.
Yes, and Dixon continued, some argue that this kind of thing is redressing the balance for past discrimination, but if you ask them to give up their place on a TV panel show for a person of colour, it would be a different story. I just want a meritocracy because that's better for everyone. Yes.
I love it. Always comes back to Kathy Newman v. Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson just going, okay, well, if you're so privileged, give up your job for someone underprivileged then. And she's just completely dumbfounded by the statement. She has no response to it because at the same time as holding all of her principles and opinions and intersectionality, she's still like, I don't want to lose my job. I've got it sweet here. Why would I want to give it up? Because at the end of the day, we're all only working in our self-interest.
But anyway, that is both a review of the no confidence vote of Boris Johnson, what the political landscape looks like in Britain, and the depressing state that the Conservative government has led us into, I suppose. So hopefully you're not too depressed. Maybe some positive changes on the way. It's always difficult to tell.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can become a member and find all of our premium content on lotuseaters.com, including the latest Epochs number 57 on Mark Antony, done by Bo and Carl. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.